All right, thank you. Good afternoon. The Board Executive Committee of the East Bay Regional Park District is now meeting on this Friday, December 9, 2022, and we're beginning the meeting at 12:35. Our recording secretary, Monica, would you please take the roll of the committee? Present. Here.
I apologize, I've lost my audio.
We noted you're present and you're serving as an alternate for Director Lane today.
Excellent.
And you're going to introduce participants?
Yes. So today in-house, we have General Manager Sabrina Landra, DGMs Dr. Anna Alvarez and Jim O'Connor, General Counsel Lynn Borgat, Eric Fuller, Claire Griffin, Steve Castile, and Lisa Bildinger, and my support staff, Connie Swisher and Samson Lee.
Thank you. And Monica, would you describe our meeting procedures and the Brown Act?
Yes. So today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 361. Board members and staff may participate via phone or video conferencing and or through a hybrid of in-person and remote attendance. We are providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so by 1, live via Zoom, 2, by submitting an email, or 3, leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda. If there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we will begin.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll proceed to our first agenda item, which is item 2, Park Advisory Committee role, definition, and agenda. Eric?
Good afternoon. Eric Fuller, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. And I'm pleased to be with you again on the Park Advisory Committee. And wanted to just first acknowledge and begin with thanking Director Rosario and General Manager Landreth for really initiating these robust discussions about the Park Advisory Committee and their role with the district and improving it and making it an entity that really is value added for everyone. And I think we've come a long way in the year that we've been having these discussions. I was reminded by Chair Obringer earlier today that we did actually start this conversation about a year ago. So happy to be here today. And it's been a very thorough conversation. And I do want to acknowledge both the PAC members, particularly the leadership with Carlin, Neil Tesui, who's the vice chair, and then Rick Rickard, who has been the chair for many years and is actually terming out this year. So we really appreciate his service to the Park Advisory Committee. Also want to acknowledge our staff. Lisa Bildinger, who's here today to speak a little bit if there's questions on some of the directions that we think we can go with the Park Advisory Committee. And then I also want to thank Flora Santos and Yuli Padmore for their work in clerking and helping put this presentation together, but also for the many presentations that we have been discussing. So for today, I wanted to just make it clear there's really 2 goals. One is we have a clear agreed upon definition of the role of the Park Advisory Committee that the PAC voted on unanimously at their November 28th meeting. And that definition was initially brought to the Board Executive Committee on October 28th, along with 2 others. And we had a fairly robust discussion with the board and landed on the definition that you see in front of you on the screen. We will be coming back to that after a little bit of discussion about the next steps, which is how do we put parameters around our PAC agenda to make them efficient, functional meetings that are productive for both staff, the board, and committee members. So with that, I will move to the main agenda items for the Park Advisory Committee. And as you can see, there really are 4 primary items that the Park Advisory Committee is asked to take a look at. And those are informational items, and we will elaborate on each of these in separate slides as we move forward. But the strategic engagement item is one that we will need to have a longer conversation about, probably at a future executive committee meeting and certainly at a number of PAC meetings. Then there are other recommendation items that the board has outlined this PAC is to weigh in on with a formal recommendation. And then the focused items, which are those, you may recall the dog use policy was one that the PAC looked at a few years ago. Next slide, please. So for the informational items, we've presented a lot of different types of informational items to the PAC in the past. And there will be opportunities to continue to do that, but we really do want the meetings to be more than just a list of informational items and have more engagement and more of that community feedback loop that every entity that we've discussed has asked for from the PAC. But these are the 7 items that really routinely are considered by the Park Advisory Committee, mostly updates, and then obviously the general manager year in review is an opportunity for the PAC to learn more about the work of the district holistically. And then you can read the rest of them, but they're all items that have come to the Park Advisory Committee every year. And I think that we should continue, or the PAC thinks that we should continue to have those items heard every year. And there are enough meetings. There's 10 meetings a year, so we can get one of these in per meeting if time when time allows. Next slide, please. This is the one that the item that I think we will continue to have refinement and just continued discussions on. And I wanted to just be clear that it's a placeholder in this presentation for now, while we do some continued discussion, but also just putting parameters around what strategic engagement might look like. And I'm happy to announce that Lisa Baldinger will be the manager for this portion of the PAC's portfolio, expanding our management capacity of the Park Advisory Committee to deliver on the promise to make it more productive and more of a working body for the benefit of the board and the benefit of staff. And just in terms of where we're going with the idea of strategic engagement, that could be anything from a thought leader, a subject matter expert discussing an item that is important to the park district. It could be a partnership we have with an existing group that our staff is clearly engaged with. So, for example, Urban Tilth is one. So it's a window to provide the community. It's intended to be a window to provide that community feedback loop on items of importance and perhaps somewhat outside of the discipline of the informational items that the PAC hears every year. Next slide. On the recommendation items, these are the 5 that in the board operating guidelines are that require a recommendation from the Park Advisory Committee to move forward. Pretty standard, and wanted to make sure that we don't lose track of the naming of facilities, parks and trails, because that could be an item that not only does the PAC make recommendations on, but that they do a deeper dive. Next slide, please. And that would be under this item, the focused items, which are intended to have the PAC's input over time, not just in one meeting, but as Deputy General Manager O'Connor has been leading the trail conversations with the PAC. That's a perfect example of a focused item for them to be providing that community feedback. The naming policy is another one. And then obviously we in the past, they looked at the dog policy. So these are items that the board directs to the PAC. And we would like to examine how best to utilize the PAC in thinking about a broader focused item. But we definitely have that as a placeholder on the agenda items moving forward. And so before we actually ask for a recommendation on the definition of the PAC's role for the Park District, I would like to invite Chair Obringer, and I also believe I saw Rick Rickard, past chair, on the Zoom to make any comments with regarding to both the role and then thinking about the agenda setting process and beginning that conversation with both the board and with the PAC and with staff.
Well, thank you, Eric. I'll start. And I just want to say how excited I am that we're here at this point, because I know there's been a lot of work on this by PAC members, including Rick and myself, as well as staff. So Eric has been very supportive, and current and previous chairs of the board, of the Park District Board. So thank you I'm excited that we're at this point. And I feel like the fact that this has been discussed at many different levels of the organization over the past calendar year, and even prior to that, I feel like it has been thoroughly vetted. And so we're in a good place, and unanimously, the PAC approved this definition at the November 28th meeting. So I think that this is a good opportunity. This has been reviewed thoroughly, and this would be a great time to move forward. And hopefully the executive committee will agree with us. And I'll turn it over to Rick to see if Rick has anything additional to add.
Thank you, Carlin, because I can't get my video, but I can talk. I agree with what Carlin has said. We really have gone over this extensively for the last year. And I think we've made some good progress. Eric mentioned early in his presentation that we would be seeing, I think you put it, fewer items of informational value, Eric. I'm not wording it the way you did, but I do think that that's something that over the years we've gotten to the point where the PAC got a lot of good information on a lot of topics, but that ended up spreading us so thin that now being able to focus specifically on the issues that are assigned to the PAC, I think will benefit our understanding of it, as well as benefiting the district in terms of being able to dive deeper into it and look at things in more detail. In one particular issue that came up, one of the items on Eric's list of 5 was the budget and comprehensive financial review. And there's been feedback that the PAC would like to get into that earlier in the process to be able to really give feedback rather than just getting an overview at the end. And that, I think, is an example of an item that would benefit from a deeper dive and more focus. And so I think we're going exactly the right direction. I'm glad to have been part of it. And thank you for bringing it this far, Eric.
And thank you, Rick, for your service, and looking forward to seeing you on Monday night at the recognition reception.
Yes.
With that, would like to open it up for questions or comments by board and also senior staff before we ask for the recommendation item.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the committee. Director Rosario.
Thank you. I too am very happy to see where we're at here, and I think having the PAC focus on fewer items, and because it really engages this incredible thought bank that we have, and make better use of those perspectives, and also an additional contact with our constituents, and also when we get those perspectives, it gives the board additional information so that we can make a decision. We don't always have to. I mean, we don't. There's 7 of us, and we have a variety of ideas and thoughts, and the more perspectives that we hear from, the better that we're able, as board members, to make a decision. So I really appreciate the effort in helping focus the PAC, and I'm glad we're here. So obviously, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Director Waspy.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I too am obviously in favor. This is a great idea. And your expression "thought bank" is a perfect, straight out, right on. I find the PAC to be their research is thorough, their work is incredibly thorough and enormous. I'm sort of glad we kind of honed that down a little bit, because I think we can really make use of the intelligence of that group. They're so intelligent, they're so engaged. I think the PAC is a tremendous asset to the district, and I know personally I learned so much from my PAC appointees, and they're just totally engaged and they totally love it, so I think we're definitely going in the right direction, and I support this fully.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, I support the recommendation and the role definition as proposed by the PAC and has been discussed at this committee's level. I think I just wanted to repeat what I said. I believe I said at the last exec committee meeting on that, and that was from my personal history and discussions with existing PAC members the last few years. There's an issue that is really for staff, and it involves a careful balancing of how much time you folks are called upon to spend on PAC matters, PAC meetings in particular. But there's been this need to try to take those issues which really aren't well suited for a one evening presentation and vote, like the budget. There's a need to try to spread out the presentation and spread out the PAC members' ability to evaluate and dialogue and think about those issues. The budget one is the one that comes to mind immediately based on history. It was always hard just to get the presentation that evening and then just bless it, that we were asked to do by voting because it was a recommendation. We get it in advance of the meeting, and some of us have the ability to study it at length and ask questions, but that's just really tough to do in a one meeting setting. So I say this with the understanding that there's a lot of staff work that goes into multi-meeting presentations. So some kind of balancing act has to be figured out on that. So if there's more time spent on subject A, then maybe subject Z doesn't come before the PAC that year. So something like that has to be done. Other than that, I'm happy with the definition here and the proposal and all the thought you folks have put into the structuring of the PAC's agenda and meetings and topics. So thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members or Carlin?
I couldn't get off mute. I apologize. I just want to say thank you. This is really, the effort is to help make the PAC more effective and more helpful to the board and the East Bay Regional Park District as a whole. So I think this is a big step in that direction. And so I want to thank the executive committee for your support throughout this effort and your support today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlin. Is there a motion from my colleagues to support the recommendation as presented?
I will move.
Moved by Director Rosario.
Second.
Director Waspy seconds. Please call the roll.
Okay. President Coffey,
Aye.
Director Rosario,
Aye.
Director Waspy.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And thank you, Eric, for the presentation. Do we have many members that are going to be termed out this year?
We have it. Well, Rick Rickard, and then I believe Alyssa Robinson, which would, you would have an appointment open.
Yeah, those will be big shoes to fill.
Well, and we'll also be losing Olivia.
Well, right, correct.
Darn.
We'll be graduating, so to speak.
Oh, that I'm going to shed here on.
And she gets to appoint her own replacement.
Yeah,
So there
she'll
you go.
get to do that. That's kind of fun.
Okay, well, thank
Thank
you.
you. We'll go to item 3. Revisions to board operating guidelines, section VB, board materials. Speaking of exciting topics.
Afternoon. Claire Griffing, Management Analyst in the General Manager's Office. Let me pull up my presentation real quick. All right. We're taking exciting steps to modernize our practices, and I'm here today to get your feedback on our proposed changes to the board operating guidelines to section 5B to support these efforts. So this afternoon, I'm going to share some background on why we've embarked on this project, our research and engagement process and results, and outline the proposed changes to the board operating guidelines related to section 5B. A little bit of background: in partnership with the clerk of the board and information services, the general manager's office has been engaged in an effort to modernize our practices and procedures to enhance efficiency, transparency to the public, align with best practices of other public agencies, and implement some of our sustainability goals. We have analyzed the current process for board agenda packet development and distribution and determined that automation will streamline the process, enhancing efficiency for those who write, review, and coordinate the development of agenda materials while increasing the timeliness, accuracy, and user experience for board members and the public. After a thorough analysis, PrimeGov, which might be a familiar name to you, was selected as the preferred software provider to implement agenda automation because of their ability to customize the software for our needs. We are in the early stages of implementation, which we hope to roll out next spring. Because agendas are already posted through PrimeGov's platform, the implementation of the software won't bring big changes for the board's experience, except for 2 key areas. The first is that there'll be an opportunity for board members to utilize an electronic annotation feature if they wish, allowing you to take notes on an electronic agenda rather than a paper copy. We'll have more information about this transition in the new year, and training will be made available to any board member who wishes to use this feature. We're in the early stages of customizing this software, and in advance of software implementation, a template for staff reports must be developed to integrate into the new software interface. This is an opportunity to modernize our practices, and we're proposing updates to our current template to align with the common practices of other public agencies. Staff has developed a proposed new template that aims to standardize practices. The Park District currently uses different agenda staff report templates for the various legislative and/or advisory bodies, and a standard template is required for software implementation and will also increase consistency for the board, staff, and members of the public. A standardized template with guidance will simplify and clarify the writing process for staff, especially for the new staff, and ensure consistency. This is an opportunity also to evaluate our current practices and align the Park District's agenda staff report format with the best practices of local public agencies to enhance transparency and accessibility and better serve the public. And a new template will also provide guidance on how to write each section to help train staff. It's important that a new agenda staff report template be developed in an inclusive, collaborative, transparent, and data-driven manner. The development of a draft template has included a robust research and engagement process. We started with an initial staff survey to understand staff needs and related to the preparation and review of agenda staff reports in July. We then reviewed the staff report formats of other public agencies to inform the development of the draft staff report template, and I'll share a little bit about that later. We then obtained feedback on the draft staff report template through a second survey, a focus group discussion with staff, as well as a meeting with executive staff. And staff was generally supportive of making the updates that we proposed, but emphasized a need for simplicity, clarity, and ongoing training. So we're aiming at that. A little bit about our research process. We reviewed the staff report formats of 22 local public agencies, including 12 local special districts, 7 Bay Area counties, and several East Bay cities. So this is a list here of who is included as the agencies. And we're proposing some changes to the current staff report template based on the staff feedback and this research. Several of the proposed changes conflict with the current language in Section 5B of the board operating guidelines, which outlines the headings included in staff reports and board agendas. So staff proposes removing this language that specifies the headings to allow for flexibility, as we would like to be able to iterate and continue to modernize our practices over time. Our proposed new staff report would differ from current practice by updating terminology, including the term agenda material instead of board material when referring to agenda packets, to be more inclusive of our committees, because committee agendas will also be hosted in the new software platform. So we want to have some consistency and be inclusive. This pie chart outlines the results of our benchmarking research, which found that agenda staff reports written by staff are most commonly referred to as either staff reports, agenda items, or agenda reports. And we therefore suggest using one of these terms on the template itself. We also suggest shortening the heading from staff recommendation to simply recommendation to align with agency best practices.
Claire, what do these percentages represent?
The 22 agencies that were surveyed, we looked at what they called their staff report.
So 34% of them said staff report, 17% said agenda report.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And some said nothing, just so you know, but all right, so they're not included in this list. The financial section of the current staff report is titled Revenue Cost, and as demonstrated in this pie chart, the Park District is the only agency of the 22 sampled that uses this term. Alternatives include funding, financial impact, and fiscal impact. And staff recommends changing the term to fiscal impact to align with the 46% of the agencies surveyed that use that term. Staff recommends keeping the background section, but refining the purpose a bit to be more specifically providing context and relevant history related to the item in line with the practices of other agencies, and replacing the alternative section with an analysis as a space for more detailed explanation and justification for the recommended action. We're proposing this change based on our research, but also to address some confusion shared by staff on how to use the alternative section. The analysis could still include alternatives for relevant actions such as the policy analysis, but it wouldn't necessarily be required for something more straightforward like a construction contract. So we want to give a little flexibility and clarify for staff and the board what that section is for. In terms of next steps, staff is seeking board approval to modify this section of the board operating guidelines to allow for more flexibility as we update and test our template and our new agenda management software. Upon approval from the board to update the guidelines, staff will finalize the new staff report template, include writing guidelines, and develop and implement staff training for the new template and the new software. Board members will also have access to training to this electronic agenda annotation that I noted, if that's of interest to them. Upon implementation, staff will provide ongoing training and will continue to seek ways to modernize and improve practices and enhance efficiency and transparency. And staff is requesting your feedback today and seeking a recommendation for the board to consider approval of the proposed changes to Section 5B of the board operating guidelines that are outlined in your attachment C. And thank you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
So I want to start off because I was confused by Exhibit B and Exhibit C and exactly what they're presenting, because I saw red lines in both. and we're approving Exhibit C, presumably its red lines, which are at some points inconsistent with each other.
Yes.
So C has a lot of line outs to language that Exhibit B actually redlines with changes, as if we're going to be considering changes. So I was confused by that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
maybe
So thank
explain.
you. Happy to clarify. So our recommendation is attachment C because those red line, that's our recommendation, but we included attachment B as an example of if we were to make red line changes to the document and actually keep that language in, that's what we'd be proposing to change. If that makes sense. So I guess they're both options for you to consider, but our recommendation is attachment C. And we wanted to be transparent in terms of showing you what are the kinds of things what are the kinds of changes we're proposing we make in the staff report template, which is why we showed that as red line changes in attachment B.
Okay, so in terms of board materials provisions being changed to agenda materials, and then the first 10 or more provisions being wiped out almost entirely, you would consider just the redlining, so we'd still have staff recommendations, but it'd be entitled recommendations instead of being wiped out or erased from the operating guidelines. All right, that explains why I was confused, but I understand it now. Directors, questions, comments? D.
Thank you. I really appreciate having the red line documents to follow everything. My only question was, what did I do with it now? Oh, here they are. So are we gonna, and we provide printed copies right now to certain like 2428 and a couple other folks out there that requested printed. So are we going to ask them to do electronic versions as well for the, I mean, as far as the actual packets for the board?
Director Rosario, I'm happy to try to answer that question. The MOU with 2428 provides that a union representative will be notified at the same time as the board that the agenda packet is ready. My understanding is that they have asked to be provided with a PDF copy rather than a paper copy. And I think that's the practice. It was there, I think it had to do with some staffing shortages. They didn't get it last time, but my understanding is that's going to continue as required by the MOU.
Okay.
Our staffing shortage or theirs?
Our staffing shortage, just somebody who was.
So there was an oversight.
It was an oversight.
Great. And then I'm totally in favor of streamlining our board operating guidelines, as Director Corbett and Lynn have spent some time on it. I'm looking forward to this. I know I myself have voluntarily gone electronic for board packets, and I think it's a lot easier for me anyway. But any training that you have, I would love to get some and see where I can make it even better and maybe even easier. So yeah, I really like the idea of standardizing everything and making everything simpler. And our board operating guidelines have, I see it as a kind of a living document. And I think the board and staff should be looking at things that need to be done on a regular basis. So thank you. I think this is great. Do we have an example of what
The new template?
the new template would look like?
We don't have a final example yet. We wanted to come to you and to the full board first to get feedback and approval, and then we'd be happy to share an example.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well done. I really appreciate the thoroughness in the presentation too. Thank you.
Dennis? You're muted.
Pardon me. I find this to be a great document. I support it. I'm concerned or a little interested in the how someone's going to teach me how to the agenda annotation. I like making notes. I of course will support the idea of paperless. Anytime we can save paper, it's right up my alley. That's what I'm into. I tried it a little while ago, and I found myself. Well, it's great. I think Diane Burgess and I were the first ones to get Surface Pros and use them during meetings. And it was interesting that I found myself, but I think I've got a lot more practice now with Zoom meetings, but I would tend to focus on my computer screen and be looking at that while we would have an audience in those days. And boy, when you got to be the chairman of a committee, then it got to be really, it seemed like I was not paying attention to the group, but I'm sure I can learn. I think I've learned a little bit. I do question, it's going to be a little interesting. I think if things work out, I'll probably be the first president. So will I get some, or will the president get some assistance? Because if we continue in January, whenever we start this, theoretically, you'll be looking at a screen with a bunch of Zoom folks on it, just like you're all doing now, and paying attention to anybody raising their hand or comments or things like that. And then also looking at another screen, which will have the agenda on it, which I guess you do anyway with paper, but it's, I think we need some practice. I'm for it. I'm wondering, you had some great statistics and some pie charts showing percentages. What percentage of those 22 agencies, if it was 22, I think, how many of those folks use paperless agendas?
Great question. That wasn't in our survey, but we're happy to get a sense of what other agencies do. I know of a handful for sure that have gone paperless over the past few years, so we can learn from them.
Okay, great. And then just some of the attachment C stuff, it's fine with me. I'm just very, very happy that under the public comments sections, there are 2 opportunities for public comments in our board meetings. I'm very, very happy that we're sticking with that.
We just haven't followed it in practice. But that may have been a decision we make on an annual basis. I don't know which. I found the second public comment period was being abused, frankly. And people were getting multiple shots at their 3 minutes. And in the past and at other agencies where I've attended meetings, my own clients over the years. So to me, it's a really, really good opportunity for public input to be able to have a public comment period not on the agenda, and then public comment on every matter on the agenda, and follow that up with an ending public comment on anything just tended to be abused. We also have the added public input on matters not on the agenda at our committees, which isn't required by the Brown Act. In fact, the Brown Act says, to me, frankly, you're not supposed to do that. In other words, when you have a committee or a special meeting, you have a very special agenda, and there isn't really notice to the public that you may go off your agenda. So that's a practice that I've always wondered about when we have special meetings or committees that allow for public comment on matters not on the agenda. So I think, Dennis, we're pretty good at public input, if we can pat ourselves on our back. Anyway, I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Were you
Sure. Yeah, I'm done. I won't defend that position. I just think that, with and it's nobody's fault, but we tend to start at different times. I'm very sensitive to that if you miss your public comment period, especially if you're an employee, who I don't know what percentage of the employees make public comments, but in the past, we can kind of figure it out. And in order to do that, you have to take time off. So it's kind of a drag. If we're behind schedule, we miss it. I think people should have the opportunity. If you came out or told your boss you're going to be off work for half an hour, from 12:30 to 1:30 just to hit the mark, and you miss it, I think you should at least have the opportunity to hit it again at the end of the meeting. Just a preference.
Yeah,
President
and
Coffey.
and our
I'm sorry.
employees are remarkably good at just emailing us with their comments and concerns. And I get employee communications all the time, but just by email in connection with a meeting or not. And I appreciate that from our employees.
I just wanted to clarify one thing, which is I appreciate Director Waspy's concern about the 1 versus 2. I do believe that what the board approved on Tuesday, which was the ultimate revisions to the board guidelines that the ad hoc committee was recommending, as well as some staff, just provides for 1 public comment period. I can go back and check, but that question isn't actually before
Us now.
the executive committee.
Just offline, could you look into that?
I will absolutely look into
So
it
that
and
we're all
and
clear
see.
on that.
I'm pretty sure that it's just 1, but I'll check.
Okay, so my own comment is it's very good work. I have often observed that the template we use or we have been using is out of date. I always kind of get a little smile out of alternatives provision, which frequently is there are no alternatives, which, if you filled it out would say there are no good alternatives. Otherwise, we would have recommended them. And so that is a part of our template that was clearly outdated. And I'm glad to see things like that updated and fixed in terms of the template that you all have devised. So any other comments? Staff, board members? Otherwise, Director Waspy, would you like to make a motion? We're considering approving and sending on to the board the revisions as presented in attachment C.
Yes, I would move those provisions.
And a second,
I will second.
Director Rosario, please call the roll.
President Coffey,
Aye.
Director Rosario,
Aye.
Director Waspy. Thank you.
I noticed these odd things about our templates and our reports, but it never occurred to me to put people to work to fix them. I'd be really reluctant to ask for staff time on something like that. So I'm glad you folks did it on your own.
Yeah, I really appreciate the effort into researching everything and bringing it to us, and it was well done. So thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate those
absolutely.
comments, because for us who are coming from the outside into this organization, you have to work with these documents and why are we doing it this way?
Mhm.
But it's all good.
When our new GM came on board and we first started having one-on-ones, she would say, why does the district do it this way? Why does the board do it this way? And I said, I don't know. It's good of you to ask. And if you think there's something that should be changed, wonderful. I remember having those conversations. So that brings us to item 4, 2023 Board Master Calendar. Dr. Alvarez.
Yes, thank you, Director Coffey, Director Osari, and Director Waspy, and members of the board. Dr. Ana Alvarez, Deputy General Manager. The item before you here is what we call the draft 2023 board and board committee meetings, or the draft 2023 board master calendar. And this is an item, Director Coffey, that we wanted to bring forward to the board executive committee as part of a discussion. It's a new practice to do this, and we're trying to be in alignment with the direction from the board. We have heard that you would like to be more engaged in agenda planning to understand what's coming ahead of us. So this is an opportunity to look at the master's calendar as we are proposing for 2023. Now, Director Waspy, as the incoming board president, is working with the clerk of the board to think about the appointments of the different board members to the 5 board committees. But the starting point is to understand when these meetings or committee take place. So I'd like to start by focusing on the board public meetings. The first square on your left, and we will continue to meet on the first and third Tuesday of the month. And the closed session, right now we moved it from 11 to 11:30, but this is something that we need to discuss because this is more of a typo. It should say 11 in the morning. So I like to know that. And also would like to bring to your attention that in the past, the board has only met once in the month of January. And so we're proposing to meet on January the 17th, the third Tuesday of the month. Since the first Tuesday of the month is too close to the holidays, it will fall on January the 3rd. And meeting on January the 17th, we are going to be doing the transfer of the gavel, which is to say thank you and express gratitude to outgoing board president, Director Coffey, and welcoming Director Waspi as the new board president for 2023. And also, he's passing on the gavel already, Director Waspi. And then also do the swearing in ceremony for our incoming board members, which this year we have 2 incoming board members. And that will all take place in that meeting.
I think we all get sworn though, don't we? Even returning?
Yes. Mhm. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Then the other thing I would like to highlight on this schedule is that in the month of June, we typically hold one of the board meetings at Big Break. And we're hoping now that we have different COVID protocols that we will be able to do that, to go back to an in-person board meeting at Big Break. That's the goal. And we'll see where we are with the pandemic. And then the other thing that I would like to point out is that in the month of August, traditionally the board of directors have taken a summer break and have held only one board meeting. And staff is recommending to meet on the first, on August the 8th and take a break and have no meeting on August the 15th. Additionally, there's another typo in the draft document. It shows that we do have a meeting in the month of December at 5 o'clock in the evening, which is the first public meeting for the budget, the proposed budget for 2024. And what we're missing on this document is a second meeting, which will be on December the 19th. So we are still meeting on December the 19th. We'll make those corrections as we continue to move forward. So that in a nutshell is what's happening for the board meetings. And if there's no questions, I'd like to focus a little bit on the board committee meetings. Okay, seeing no questions. The board committees, there's 5 board committees, and I would like to note that there's no board committee meetings on Mondays, I should say. And we're trying to create a balanced schedule because we do have board members that are working board members, and there's a lot of time that is taking and participating in these board committees. And the first board committee that I would like to focus on is the board executive committee. And traditionally, this meeting has taken place on the second Thursday of the month. Right now, we're meeting on Fridays, but we're bringing it back on 2023. There's concurrence to go back to what traditionally has been. You also have the option, since it will be Director Waspi serving on this board executive committee and making the appointments, Director Coffey as the outgoing board president, and the incoming vice president, Director Echols, if that's the choice of the board at the meeting on December the 20th. You do have an option, and I do want to bring that to your attention, to release your calendars. We can't meet on the 4th Tuesday of the month. So what's happening here is that on Tuesdays, we do have the first and third Tuesdays, the board meetings, and the second Tuesday of the month is the board operations committee. So you have the 4th Tuesday open, or you can select to stay on the second Thursday of the month. That's just giving it for you to think about.
You're juxtaposing the 4th Tuesday against what?
Against the second Thursday of the month.
For exec.
For exec. Mm-hmm.
Just for myself, I've found on occasions that having free Tuesdays was a good thing, because people would say, can you meet on a Tuesday? And I could say, except for the first and third. In other words, for those who want to have meetings in our other or extended lives as directors beyond just business meetings, it's been convenient for me to have a free Tuesday or two. For those who want to meet on Tuesdays and we can't on the first and third. So that would be my preference on that one.
I think it's some of these got changed because of committee members had to work. So we had to adjust per their schedule. So I'm kind of don't want to make a decision without those working members having an input as to which days so that they're available. And we don't even know which committees we're on yet. So, but I think it's good to have have a set schedule, and then as the committees populate with board members, and then I think we kind of have to wait and see how they can attend. So I'm kind of nervous about, our working members.
I just to share that thought for a moment, what concerns me, and it concerns me a lot, is the Brown Act changes. And Dennis, you're going to have to give some thought to this as you get committee requests. Can we put this down off the screen so I can see everyone on the Zoom? If we're done with it, if you're not done with it.
No, I'm not done with it, but.
Okay.
But go ahead, make it.
Then I'll just finish the thought because I see Dennis is there. But the thought is that we as board members, in looking at committee and committee participation, should bear in mind that this is no longer for us a completely hybrid meeting setting, such that we pick our committees and look at the times and figure, well, I can make that time by Zoom, or I can make that meeting on a regular basis by Zoom, because the legislature just took away from us that frequent, totally hybrid approach for elected board members. Clearly, they designed the rules to make that the exception, and then limit the number of times we can choose to attend by Zoom. So, medical issues or, some kind of conflicts, we get to pick once in a while to do that. But otherwise, we got to be physically present at these meetings. Mm-hmm. So the hybrid world that we're now in is going to be a boon to our public and our constituencies and stakeholders who don't necessarily get the opportunity to come to our meetings physically, but not for our board. Mm-hmm. So I'm very concerned that our colleagues, Dennis, do not choose their committees and the timing of it and the degree of participation based on the thought that they're just going to attend by Zoom. So we have to factor that in. And I know it's on our agenda, on the full board agenda, to get a briefing from legal counsel on this requirement of us personally at these meetings and the attendance. But we're already picking. I know I sent some selections in, but I'm concerned that people don't keep that in mind. And D adds that, some of these folks are actually working with the other jobs, and they have to take that into consideration, along with the fact that it's a lot easier if you're holding down a job 9 to 5 but you can take time off for a Zoom meeting, and that may not be an option for some of our working board members. So that's one thought, and I'm put it back to you, Dennis. If you want to add anything, then let Anna finish her presentation.
Well, yeah, I think that's a very important thought, Colin, because I've already got board members calling me wanting to have a sideline talk about what their committee wishes are. And I think that's amazing information. And Lynn, I know you're going to give us a briefing on it, but if you can send me anything that tells me what that is, because I will definitely tell my fellow board members that that's going to be a change that we're going to have to deal with.
I would be happy to send you something, Director Waspie.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, Director Coffey, for bringing that forward. That's why we want to give you the dates in advance. And then we're asking Director Waspie, as the incoming board president, in the consideration of the appointments to these board committees, that that we solidify the schedules based on the availability, especially of the working board members that are coming in. And so you have an opportunity. We can continue the conversation through Dennis about finalizing the board executive committee schedule. But in that note, I would also say that the Board Operations Committee, as well as the Board Finance Committee, is the same schedule it has been in the past. And also the Legislative Committee, we have made some small changes, but they have been noted on 2023. And the Natural and Cultural Resources Committee is meeting 5 times out of the year. We have, this is something again that's within the discretion of the board. If there's an interest to meet more, then that's an opportunity to have a conversation as based on what's coming on the agenda. The other piece that I wanted to share briefly is that all of these committees, they do also take a break. And you can see that the Board Operations doesn't meet in the month of August, whereas the Finance Committee doesn't meet in the month of December, and the Legislative Committee is taking November off. And they all for many different reasons, but we are taking some breaks. The Board Executive Committee traditionally doesn't take a break, but there's something to consider as you think about what else as we're putting together the Board Executive Committee look ahead calendar for January. That's a conversation that I can follow through with Director Waspi. And on the back of the calendar, we also added the 2023 conferences so that you can start penciling those in. There are some that conflict with this master calendar of meetings. We meet here very often. And so there are conflicts. And so what we're asking for board members is that to please consider your options, especially for the board committees, that if there's a conflict and for some reason you cannot participate at the board committee meeting, that you do avail yourselves of the alternate and allow the alternate board member to join in your stead. Because as you can see, there's a lot of moving pieces here to be able to juggle rescheduling of meetings, which this is a goal of staff that we're going to try to minimize that as much as we can. That's the beauty about having the benefit to have the board president appoint an alternate. So we would like to do that. And on the conferences, there's also additional dates that I would like to highlight briefly right now, which our government and legislative affairs team, we have identified the events for 2023, so you can have them in advance. Please pencil them in and save the date. So we're doing the state advocacy in person in Sacramento on January the 31st to February the 1st. And we're also doing the Federal Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C. on March the 13th to the 17th. Traditionally, not all board members do attend or have attended in the past, but we do want to encourage you to think about those dates and to start signaling to staff, to the team, if this is something that you would like to do. And then also on April the 28th of 2023, the government and legislative team is hosting again the appreciation lunch in Sacramento, the legislative appreciation lunch, and we certainly would like to encourage you to attend as well. There are other conferences that have traditionally been part of the calendar for board members who like to participate. This is the information that we know as of today. Those are maybe subject to change if things happen as it happened in 2020. Or if there's any other conferences that you might have an interest in attending, please let the clerk of the board know so that we can add it to the master calendar and we can all share the same information. What's not on this calendar, but I would like to make a note of it, is that we also have study sessions. And those study sessions will come later in the month of late January, early February, once we understand better the schedule of the incoming board officers, incoming board members. So we'll add those to their calendars and see their availability, because we certainly would like them to avail themselves of those study sessions, which are very, very important in understanding the operations of the Park District. And lastly, I would like to share with you that thank you to the Division of Operations. Here you have, as we're closing the year, you have ahead the 6 board tours that are scheduled for 2023. So here's the whole schedule in front of you. Please save the dates, put them on your calendar. Again, if there's any conflicts, we already identified the conflicts, but those are choices because we have a really, really tight and a full schedule. And that's the end of my presentation, Director Coffey.
Thank you. I would urge those who are engaged in planning the field trips, the site tours, to consult with board members as that are representing that particular region in the ward. I've noted that the field trips seem to be ward oriented, and you folks try to move us around to interesting facets of planning for those various wards. But I felt really good about being able to influence a bit the field trip to East Contra Costa in that area. And one of my suggestions made it into the field trip and others didn't, but I just think it'd be a good practice, again, to engage us more in agenda building, in particular with regard to the field trips. I understand that that's staff generated. That is you folks deciding what future projects or future operations are a good thing to show the board at a given time. Might be better for us to see this year and something else the following years. And that's something that you folks would have in mind and better than we would have. But I do think some individual board member input on their region would be helpful ultimately to your planning. The only other note I want to make, then I'll look to my colleagues, is last year, and I think it was primarily because of staffing issues, we were really slow in getting around to finalizing these dates, and we were changing dates around for several months and getting the board committee appointments done, and then the workshop dates. And a lot of that was because we decided to change the way we were doing some of the workshops, especially on priorities and goal setting. And so, we had a couple board members, including myself, I shouldn't say others, that were really anxious about getting those workshops going, and their dates weren't finalized for a long time. So I'm hoping, I'm the only reason I'm dredging this up is because there was some frustration. I felt it last year about how, and I was present. I was responsible for getting committee assignments out and dates out. And I felt a bit frustrated by that whole process. So hopefully this year we'll get up and running and have all our staff engaged and working on these calendar issues and these board work issues this year. Director Rosario, I think otherwise this is good. I'm thankful that you brought it to us at this point.
Yeah. Let's see, there's just a couple questions. When we go to like the state advocacy and federal advocacy, is there a Brown Act? Anything concerns about the Brown Act, about how many board members attend those?
Are you speaking about with respect to committee assignments?
No, to the state advocacy and the federal advocacy days?
No.
Okay, great. And then,
Well, you have limitations in terms of like, you still can't huddle with your colleagues to, but you understand the limitations of the Brown Act. You're allowed to attend these events altogether.
okay, great. Yeah, I mean, typically we split up on these days anyway, because the appointments are staffed, and it helps to have a lot of board members. It saves on the walking. And then there's a couple of conferences that I see that aren't on here that we should probably consider. And there's both Alameda and Contra Costa resource districts have, conservation districts have like a 1 or 2 day conference typically. I don't know if they had them last year. And then one I like to go to is there's a local Bay Area estuary conference. I've gone in the past, but last year they didn't have it. The last couple of years they didn't have it. So those should be see if they're actually going to have them this year, and because especially the local estuary one, I get a lot of that because there's a lot of concern over sea level rise, so there's a lot of discussion there. So And then, yeah, it's nice to have all these laid out ahead of time. And oh, I just wanted to point out on the board operating guidelines that we passed, I think we recommended having no, I mean, it's probably good here for the board committees, but not listing a set time for a closed session because they can change. So I think we amended with the board operating guidelines to not have a stated time.
We did in fact do that, Director Rosario. I do think it would be a good idea to have an approximate time on the calendar. And I don't foresee there being any major change to the starting time. So it's usually it's around 11 o'clock. If it might be half hour earlier or half hour later, but I think it would be a good idea, especially for the incoming board members, to have that on the sheet if possible.
That's it. Thank you for bringing this forward. Appreciate the opportunity.
Dennis?
Yeah, thanks, Anna, and thanks for your staff for doing this. It's always great to plan ahead. I have a couple of questions, and I want to agree with you 100%, Anna. Having an alternates is really important. I mean, the last time I was president, people would go, oh, I'm busy this day, and it's so busy, and it's so important that I can't I'm doing something else. Well, if it is, then you have an alternate. And I think it's good. I like being here as an alternate today. I get to see a new group. I get to hear different things. I think does nothing but enhance the operation. And you'd mentioned, Anna, or maybe I didn't understand you correctly, that it was like, if you're not going to make a meeting, please call your alternate. I would much rather have a little more solidified. If you're not going to make a meeting, tell somebody, and then the alternate should be invited, or what's a stronger word than invited? We expect the alternate to be able to come if they have, unless they have that's another important thing that they can't do. But I hope we could formalize that a little more, because I think it's valuable to have an alternate. And I think you guys do a lot of work to do these committee meetings and to speak to two board members. I think you get a third more bang for your buck if you get that third member in there. And then August meetings, gosh, I'm not a jet setter, but boy, I think Ellen and I kind of wanted these August meetings to be just one board meeting. And I find, if the board meeting is on August 8th, that's great. If I want to fly off to Aruba, boy, potentially I'm going to have to come back on August 10th for an executive committee meeting. If I'm on the legislative committee, I have to come back on the 18th. It's no vacation. So
You don't want to go to Aruba in August. You go to Aruba in January or December.
Excellent point.
All right.
Okay. I try to make my point in some way here. I think it's the operations committee is the only committee that doesn't have a meeting in August, right? Or although natural and cultural resources, of course. So I note, I'm just asking the question, but I'm sure there's a good reason, but the legislative committee decided their no meeting would be the July meeting. That would free up a whole month, a truly whole month in some cases, if they had a meeting in July and not in August.
Well, actually, thank you, Director Watson.
Suggestion.
Yeah, and I'd just like to note that the legislative committee right now in the proposed calendar, they're proposing a break in July and November. So we'll certainly come back and have a conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And also, along with the conferences, does anybody know whatever happened to the special park district conference? I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask that.
We had a tremendous, we hosted the last one, if I'm not mistaken.
We hosted the last one before COVID. The one before that was South Carolina. And then the upcoming one was supposed to be in Ohio and then Seattle, and those all got canceled.
So, I find that, that's probably, in my opinion, one of the best conferences. And not only that, but it was a showcase for us to have people come and visit us. It was incredible.
This is Jim O'Connor, Deputy General Manager. My understanding is that Hamilton County in Ohio plans to host in 23. So I think they're trying to get that back together.
Good.
But we'll do a little research and get back to you on that.
Yeah, it was going to be in Cleveland, I think.
Yeah, I think those are usually in June. So we'll do a little research if we can get some
They are
dates on
really
that.
good conferences because they're really focused on agencies that are very similar to us around the country. Lisa?
Oh, Jim already covered it. I had asked the same question, so I just sent him the link. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Dennis, any further
Oh, no,
observations?
thank you. That's it.
Mine, just someone to look into CSDA legislative days. Eric, isn't that in Sacramento and their annual conference would be in Monterey? I'm wondering if that's reversed there. You might want to just look into that.
Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs. I just don't have a mic where I'm sitting, but the legislative days are separate from their annual conference. And it's typically mid-May. And they also typically plan it right around the same time the CARPD conferences. So people, and I know Dennis knows this well, but people will go from Sacramento and then continue to Tahoe for the CARPD conference. And then their CSDA's annual conference with the displays and exhibits, that is typically in September and it moves around the state.
Okay, so this chart indicates the annual conferences in Sacramento.
It could
and
be.
that the legislative days are in Monterey. And to me, that
So we'll check on that as well, Director.
just someone look and see if that's reversed. And then I'd be disappointed because an event in Monterey overlaps with an event in Yosemite. Now that,
Mhm.
not that I look at where these things are held, though I was disappointed CSDA held last year's annual meeting in Palm Springs in August. Speaking of places you don't want to go in August. Anyway. But the CS, that's why they do it, right? They get the hotel rates really low in August in Palm Springs. That's why you frequently get hotel days given away in Palm Springs in August. The CSDA annual conference, though, is very good. I've attended it a couple of times and it's really well done. Any other comments or observations from the board? This is really great to get out there and start working on perceived problems in advance and put in a good effort on it. It's appreciated. Next is item 5, public comments. So do we have any general public comments? Monica, none? No requests? Anyone want to put their hand up? I'll look around the Zoom room. No one here physically. So before adjourning, we'll go to committee comments and the GM or deputy GM's comments. Committee member comments? Director Rosario?
I just wanted to, this is my last executive board meeting and it's been a wonderful 3 years. I really appreciate going through the transition from one general manager to another, and I thought it was as flawless as it could be. And I really appreciate the everyone's candid reports and opinions, and I think that's what the communication in this group is very, very good, and I think that's what makes us a good organization. And I just wanted to thank everyone for your participation and your kindness and hearing me stumble along. But yeah, I enjoyed the privilege of serving on this committee for 3 years. So thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Director Waspy, anything to add in closing?
Yeah, well, just thank you, Dee, and I look forward to coming onto this committee because it is so important and so great that happens. I'd just like to thank staff for the great party that we had yesterday for Ann Kassenbaum. I think it was just really wonderful for everybody's spirits, and when we honor people like that. And just as a send off, I want you all to know that I don't know that I should admit this, but Brian Skinner was just a lonely painter in Castro Valley, and I also my soccer coach. And I said, hey, Brian, you ought to come to work for the district. So I'm responsible for that. Brian's great career in the district and possible great career as a comedian somewhere for sure. That's it.
Well, I sense you're taking credit for Brian's existence.
It's either or.
Well, you
Depending on
should.
how you thought of his performance yesterday.
He's wonderful. You know, I get once a year, I get to hang out with Brian for an afternoon at Big Trucks Day in Antioch.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And it is so much fun hanging with Brian as he engages with our public out there and talks about his sanitation equipment. It's really, it's really a lot of fun. He ought to be a park ambassador someday. He's so good at that.
Yeah.
My, yeah. Yeah, I have no comments other than Monica, thank you. And thank you for all the staff to put us in the time and effort to make these meetings in these new formats work. One of these days we'll get it down. Just perfect. Nah. Thank you, Monica. GM, what?
Just real quick, it looks like it's going to be at Lake County Forest Preserve in Illinois in June, the Special Park District Forum. So it's not in Ohio, since we spent a lot of time in Ohio in the last few years. So it's good to try something different.
Who's the host of it?
Lake County Forest Preserves.
That's a special park district?
Yep, and they've attended all the ones that I've gone to. So we'll get that on the calendar though.
Well, I'm glad someone brought it up.
That is thanks to our crack acting AGM of ASD, Lisa Gorgian.
Who in real time is Googling this stuff. That's really, it's great to have people doing that. We get in trouble for doing that, not staff. Anything else from staff? Okay, so we are ready to adjourn. Thank you all very much. Wonderful presentations today. See you soon, Dennis. And we all have what is the PAC event is coming up? PAC Monday? Here? Monday at the park. Outside. We'll see you all there.